people? And what's gone wrong? Oh, don't worry, it wouldn't be chasing Dissent if we didn't do something slightly wrong right at the very start. But yeah, I think we've cracked it. So, good evening, Ed. How are you?
Good evening, John, and good evening, everyone listening. I'm absolutely fine, thank you.
Good.
I've had a very long week, but I'm looking forward to a bit of rabbit hole exploration because it takes my mind off.
We all like a bit of rabbit hole, don't we, people?
Yeah.
So let's get the pleasantries out of the way. Remember, as per Ben's instructions, you must like us, you must subscribe, you must hit the notification bell, and you must comment, because comments drive the algorithm. So we want to gain it. But other than that, how's the audio? Is the audio okay? Ed, could you give us a little bit?
Yeah, well, I was just thinking that you and Ben are getting a bit bossy in your old age. Must do this, must do that. Someone tells me I must do something, I'll stick my finger up at them and go and smoke a joint.
Well, you know what? I'm with you on that, Ed. I'm completely with you. Because I don't know if you saw my solo show on Monday.
I missed it. I'm sorry.
I do not think I asked for one like, and we got like 16 or something, or 18. So I have no problem.
Bit of reverse psychology.
Yeah. Well, you know what Ben's like. He is a bit bossy, isn't he? So they're commenting on my haircut. Why? Thank you, Jolene.
Right. So, shall we begin?
Thank you, Julie. Nice hair. Yes, thank you. Yeah. Let's dig into this, Ed. This is sometimes known as the UK's 9/11, isn't it?
It very much was the UK's 9/11, both in terms of the impact it had on the population. I mean, bear in mind that the UK, unlike the US, had been targeted before by terrorists.
Yeah.
Well, supposedly, of an Irish description. And I actually live not too far from one of their targets here, which is the Grand Hotel in Brighton that nearly took out the Conservative government.
Mm-hmm. Including Margaret Thatcher.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Norman Tebbett's wife was killed or disabled or something.
And was Dennis not injured? Remember Dennis?
I think Dennis.
Margaret's husband. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, July the 7th, 2005 started. It was like 9/11. It started very much like any other day. It was kind of buzzing because it was the day before the bombings. It had been announced that London was going to host the 2012 Summer Olympics. Mm-hmm. But at about 8:50 a.m., 3 bombs detonated simultaneously on the Circle Line of the London Underground, travelling from Liverpool Street to Aldgate and Edgware to King's Cross and Paddington to Edgware. Let me just pull up a quick map. There we go.
See, this is the kind of content you don't normally get. A map of the London Underground, annotated with bomb sites.
Yeah, and it's not. It's not the most usual thing in the world. So we had 3 explosive devices packed with fragments of metal which tore through train carriages jam-packed with commuters. And if anybody's been on the London Underground at 8:59 in the morning, you'll know just how many people we're talking about.
Yeah.
And then just an hour later at 9:47, a 4th suicide bomber detonated his device on a number 30 double-decker bus at Tavistock Square, which I've always found it interesting that it was Tavistock Square. Because of the Tavistock Institute, and that's a whole other rabbit hole.
Do you think? Well, I don't know if are you going to go into the timings and why that guy was different from all the rest, or shall I just leave it and let you carry on?
Yeah, no, we'll cover that.
Right, okay.
Hopefully, I think we will. I've got loads of questions anyway, so we're going to go through a bunch of different stuff. So the official explanation is that we had 4 suicide bombers, later identified as that was them going to. They caught the train from Bedford, and there's all sorts of weirdness about that particular journey because the train they're supposed to be on was cancelled. So, but yeah, Mohammed Siddiq Khan, Shihzad Tanweer, Hasib Hussain, and Jermaine Lindsay. Khan, Tanweer, and Hussain were British Pakistani, while Lindsay was a convert to Islam who also had a Jamaican origin. Each was placed at the grim epicenter of these attacks at the various metro and bus stations, which are among the busiest in the whole of London. Perhaps one of the most perplexing elements to this tragedy was the report that a simulation of this is where it gets interesting.
Well, this is where the similarity to 9/11 comes in straight away, doesn't it?
Yeah, and this is why I'm jumping straight to it. So could you possibly play the Peter Power video that I sent you?
I can do that. I may pause it halfway through it just for the purposes of us talking over it, so that we're adding to it, and therefore if anyone tries to copyright us, we can say no, it was a review and transitory. And sorry people for that, but sometimes you've got to play the game. You've got to play the game.
Absolutely.
Issue. Today we were running an exercise for a company, bearing in mind I'm now in the private sector, and we sat everybody down in the city, 1,000 people involved in the whole organisation, but the crisis team, and the most peculiar thing was we based our scenario on the simultaneous attacks on the Underground and mainline station. So we had to suddenly switch an exercise from fictional to real. And one of the first things is, get that bureau number. When you have a list of people missing, tell them. And so it took a long time.
Right. Sorry, people. I was just adding in the audio, so you should be able to hear us now. Yeah. So Ed was telling us that that's Peter Power. Now, who is Peter Power, Ed?
He's the managing director of Visor Consultants, and Visor Consultants are a company that does crisis exercises, emergency drills, that kind of thing. And he is explaining that on the morning of 7/7, his company was conducting a drill on the London Underground that was simulating the exact thing that ended up happening at the exact stations where it ended up happening. And if you play it in a second, but he goes on to say that they just happened to be in the right place at the right time. And so let's just play it.
Right, I'm going to play it. We probably won't hear it, Ed, because if I turn us on, we introduce an echo. So
sure,
we'll just play it. We'll probably let it play out now.
Just to get this right, you were actually working today on an exercise that envisioned virtually this scenario.
Almost precisely. I was up until 2 o'clock this morning because it's our job, my own company, Visor Consultants. We specialise in helping people to get their crisis management response. How do you jump from slow time thinking to quick time doing? And we chose a scenario with their assistance, which is based on a terrorist attack.
He said their assistance. We chose a scenario based on their assistance. So who's their assistance? Who's there? Who are these people?
It took quite a long time, and I have to jump forward in my notes a little bit. But it was basically I've got it here somewhere. No, I can't find it.
It's not Pfizer. It's Visor. VISOR. Okay, people.
Yeah, they were. Let me just pull up my WikiSpooks page. They were employed by another entity whose name I thought I had it in my notes,
is it something like Transport for London before that was a thing, or something like that? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Details of this rather obviously failed to emerge over the next decade, and Power has never been called to testify under oath about the matter. While initially not disclosing who had commissioned the exercise, he later stated that it was the publisher and backer of the UK's largest arms fair, Reed Elsevier. And Elsevier is also the largest publisher. They own the vast majority of scientific journals. But why would a publishing company be paying a crisis management specialist to conduct an anti-terror exercise in London, and that happens to coincide with?
Oh, these are questions, Ed. Let's play the list of it through, and then we can dig back in. Yeah,
sure.
Because they're very close to a property occupied by Jewish businessmen. They're in the city, and there are more American banks in the city than there are in the whole of New York. A logical thing to do. And I've still got the...
I was going to say, how extraordinary today must feel for you as it unfolds. You mentioned a few moments ago there our experience with Irish Republican terrorism. Yeah. And of course, it was very different, wasn't it? Because however perverted their behaviour, the IRA believed itself to have some sort of code of honour and tended to issue warnings, although of course they often came late to do any good. But
well, there we go. Yeah, that was interesting. So what he said there, Ed, was that there are more American banks in that area, or in the city of London, than there are in New York.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I mean, the city of London is, I mean, it's a whole episode on its own, because what people don't understand is that when you actually go into the city of London, you're effectively entering an entirely separate political and economic entity compared to the rest of London. They have their own police force, they have their own Lord Mayor, they have processions, and it's all about the livery companies and stuff like that. And it is one of the most...
It's a bit like a city-state, isn't it, almost? It's a bit like San Marino or the Vatican or something like that. You know, they're
I mean, and the same with Washington. It's the same with Washington, D.C. as well. And I mean, that Peter Power thing it was never really covered by the mainstream media, surprise, surprise, but word soon started leaking out, because I was following this very closely when it happened. And I was actively blogging as well at the time. And there started to come out, there were rumors about another anti-terror exercise that was just like 9/11 and like so many of these other so-called terrorist attacks. So we've heard, just to give people an idea of some of the carnage, I mean, that's one of the train carriages.
Yep.
And that's outside Aldgate Station. And yeah, there was extensive damage to the tube, and there are a lot of very badly hurt people. I've deliberately...
Right. So,
go on.
Yeah. So looking at the train and the evidence we've seen so far in your pictures, it doesn't tie in with what someone said on Twitter today about, can you explain how the bomb went off underneath the train carriage? Because that looks very much like inside the train carriage explosions to me.
That's one of my unanswered question, and it was a passenger called Bruce Lay who had given testimony. Well, not testimony, but he'd been telling people that the floor of the carriage that he walked through had the metal blown upwards. And I went hunting. I mean, I've spent quite a long time when I was putting together the slides, looking at every single source that I could think of, including parts of the dark web where there's information as well.
Yeah.
And I couldn't find any pictures that would back up his story, and I couldn't back in the day either.
Yeah.
But there is still the official narrative has issues, as you would expect. And the official Home Office account includes the following paragraph. 0740, the London King's Cross train leaves Luton Station. There are conflicting accounts of their behaviour on the train. Some witnesses report noisy conversations. Another believes he saw two of them standing silently by the set of train doors. The four stood out a bit from usual commuters due to their luggage and casual clothes, but not enough to cause suspicion. This was the beginning of the summer tourist period, and Luton Station serves Luton Airport. Now, investigative reporter Nick Collerstrom, who wrote a fabulous book about the 7/7 bombings. So anyone who's interested in it and hasn't read that book, I strongly recommend it.
Bit of a controversial character, is there, Nick? And
yes.
We won't go into why, right? Because that is one of the things that would get us banned.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But he is an interesting character, but he's also been the subject of a lot of smear attempts and a lot of the, I mean, early attempts at cancelling people and just this sort of stuff that we've become used to over the last 3 years. But he discovered that the 7:40 a.m. train, allegedly taken by the bombers, had been cancelled on that day. In response, Home Secretary John Reid made a statement to the House and revised the official narrative to state that the bombers caught the 7:25 a.m. from Luton. This, however, was 23 minutes late, according to station officials, making it hard to see how the alleged bombers could have reached their different destinations in time.
Okay.
Now, they also left their cars at Luton Station. At least one of them had recently had a baby. And when you look into these four characters, they just don't seem like the type. They just seemed like just regular British Muslims. I mean,
but
there's no...
What is the type? You know, what is the type?
That's true. No, that's a fair point. The other thing is that there's deliberate obfuscation by MI5. Now, a guy called Andrew Parker led MI5's response to the 7/7 attacks. And MI5's legal team argued that by law, only brief, neutral, and factual verdicts can be recorded, leading to charges that they were attempting to gag justice by restricting the verdicts of the inquests into the victims of the 7/7 attacks. In 2011, it emerged that at the inquest into the deaths of 7/7 victims, in April 2004, an unnamed senior officer in the security services had sent a photo of Mohammed Siddiq Khan and Shahzad Tanweer to the USA, supposedly in an effort to identify them. Rather than send the original photo, however, he cropped it, added noise, decreased the contrast, and rendered it in black and white. When asked why, an anonymous...
something Adam would do.
And when asked why, an anonymous agent G suggested that the aim might have been to get them identified as speedily as possible. G insisted that it would be nonsensical and offensive to suggest that MI5 had failed to act to prevent an attack that they supposed or hypothesized was coming. I'm sorry, where have we heard that before?
Yeah.
I mean, how many supposed terrorist attacks have actually had the bloody government behind them? I'm
convinced 9/11 was an inside job because it just set up so many different changes in the law and how they could control people, and the Patriot Act in particular. And remember the two people that were speaking out against the Patriot Act, they're the ones that got the anthrax delivered to them, aren't they?
Yep.
Yeah.
And it was the whole thing. I mean, the anthrax. Yeah, because the anthrax attacks happened around about the time that Congress was supposed to pass the Patriot Act. So it was just, it's even at the time, it seemed so contrived and manipulated.
Yeah. Well, it was the anthrax attacks caused the capital to be evacuated, and therefore they couldn't filibuster the bill, and the bill passed because they couldn't filibuster it. So there you go. I mean, it was very convenient because these guys were going to stand up all night and talk it out so as the bill couldn't pass. And there you go.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's it's the same thing happened after 7/7. What you were saying about laws changing and an attack on privacy and freedom, and all in the name of terrorism. The government always offers to keep you safe if you give your freedom away. It's one of the things that governments do.
And just in case people are thinking, you guys are going off piste here because this is sounding like, far-fetched. Remember that it is a matter of public record now that the government experimented on you in the underground with toxic chemicals.
Mm-hmm.
That's a matter of public record. The government did this without telling you what they were doing. They spread toxic chemicals and infections on the London Underground and tracked people to see how far it would spread. And that's public record. So, it's not that much of a stretch to say that they might do something else,
There's also, it's equally a matter of public record that the security services were heavily involved in actually infiltrating IRA terrorists and having them carry out attacks that were then blamed on the IRA, but actually the whole thing was instigated by MI5. And the same is true in the US. I mean, there's huge amounts of evidence of a lot of terrorists effectively just being FBI informants, and it's the FBI handler that's coaxing the person into blowing something up. The other interesting thing about the bombings themselves was the explosives, which and early reports from the media, which is when something like this happens, the most accurate stuff you'll see will tend to be the first few reports until they get the narrative. It's the same with 9/11. Until they get the narrative under control, you have this. It's a bit of a free for all, and all sorts of people get interviewed. And then suspiciously, those interviews never get seen again, and then they get denied, and then you get called a conspiracy theorist for even suggesting it.
Yeah.
But early reports were saying that the explosives that the detectives investigating reported trace of the military explosive RDX.
Okay.
But again, you try and like search for RDX London bombings, and all you'll get is you can't ask that question. Ask that question because you're a conspiracy theorist. Now,
is RDX like Semtex? Everybody knows what Semtex is. Yeah, is it just another variation of it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The chemical name is hexogen. Now, another suspicious. This harkens back to our Diana episode, because guess what wasn't working on 7/7? The CCTV. But
and yet London,
even
then, London would be one of the most surveilled places on the earth.
It was. I mean, the two things that did it for me back in the day with 7/7 and had me right from the start convinced that this was some sort of psyop was the fact that there was an exercise happening and the fact that there was no CCTV. And I mean, there's more CCTV now than back then, but back then, even in 2005,
there was.
The UK still had a reputation of having vast amounts of CCTV. But none of it's ever been released. So in some cases, they said, for example, on the bus, that the cameras weren't functioning, despite having had a crew working on them in the days leading up to the event. And interestingly, the crew that was sent to maintain the cameras was different from the crew. There was interviews with personnel at the bus depot, and the crew was different from the guys that they normally sent. One interesting rabbit hole-y thing that I came across is an article on Nick Hollostrom's website, which is still active, unlike a lot of the other research sites that were put up after 7/7. But there's potential links to some sort of EMP. Now, this is actually researching this podcast was the first time that I came across the EMP stuff. But at least 22 survivors of 7/7 had pretty remarkable stories to tell, which bore marked similarities to the experience of what they've all almost universally described as being electrocuted or subject to electric shock. There were additionally reports of white lights, whooshing sounds, clicking noises, flames outside the train carriages, and hair standing on end.
Would you feel an EMP though?
The thing is that it doesn't have to be just an EMP. It could also be just a microwave device, for example, or a combination of electromagnetic and microwave type directed energy weapon.
Well, hold on.
Things.
So what was the purpose of this EMP then?
I don't know. The exact root cause of the electric shock reports cannot be determined from available evidence, but frequent references by the media to so-called power surges can be eliminated and can possible contact with live equipment.
Could the train have bridged the live rail? No, when it was blown up.
That wouldn't have had. You would have. No, because apart from anything else, it's not. The passengers wouldn't have noticed.
Yeah.
You might have heard a sound, you might have seen a flash, but they wouldn't. You wouldn't have people saying that they felt like. Maybe if the metal of the carriage touched the live rail and the person happened to be touching a handrail or something.
Yeah, but then again, the carriages are mainly aluminium, aren't they? And that's not a great conductor, is it?
No.
Right, let's roll this back a little bit, okay? Do we have any evidence for this, or is it just a hearsay of a few people that were there at the time?
This is actually based on... hang on a minute, let me find the site. Again, this is literally something I came across the other day when I was looking into it. And it's the first time I'd ever really researched it at all.
Uh-huh.
So sorry, just keep talking, John.
Yeah, no, that's okay. People in the chat, remember, if you, I can't really point to it because it's like miles away, but down at the bottom of the screen, if you ever want to think about supporting us, if you're ever at the point where you're able to throw us a meager stipend, then we are always very grateful for anything that keeps us on air, because this is our full-time job. Not Ed's, but mine and Ben's. So drop us something at ko-fi.com/chasing dissent or patreon.com/chasing dissent, and we would love that if you could manage it. If you really want to go the whole hog, you can become a subscriber on Ko-fi and join be one of our citizens at Veridora. Ed, back to you.
Thank you very much. I found the article now. It's the website is terroronthetube.co.uk.
Okay.
And if you go to there, you'll see a menu item for 7/7 articles. And in that list is a 7/7 EMP hypothesis written by a guy called Tom R. Butler. Mm-hmm. And it's called, Could Electromagnetic Pulse or EMP or High-Powered Microwave Devices Have Been Used in the 7th of July 2005 London Underground train explosions? And it's a long piece and it's very well written. And it has, if you're interested in the nuts and bolts of the theory, then... that's worth a read.
Yeah.
And what I'm giving you guys here is essentially just the concluding piece of that article. So there's timing issues again. This is something that crops up again and again with the 7/7 bombings. That there's timing issues everywhere, and there's timing issues with the guys getting on the train or not getting on the train. There's timing issues with certain aspects of what happened after the initial explosions. The timing given for the Aldgate explosion is accepted as 0849, and that's not disputed.
Okay.
The timing of the tripping of London Underground's 11 kilovolt feeder number 642, because part of what happened was complete power outage.
Okay.
And the tripping of that feeder had a cascading effect on other equipment. But that timing is subject to uncertainty. But it may be concluded on the balance of probability that it was coincident with the Aldgate explosion that operated the emergency tunnel telephone tripping system. Timing of the power interruption reported by Underground at the 7/7 inquest of 084840 disagrees with the accepted time of the Aldgate train bomb of 0849, but could fall within the stated range of uncertainty. This matter was not subject to any cross-examination at the inquest. Furthermore, the uncertainty regarding timing implies the hypothesis that damage was deliberately inflicted on the power system, and that shouldn't be ruled out. Widespread impact of...
Did this power outage just affect the underground, or did it affect any surface companies and businesses?
Well, this is the bit that I was just about to get to.
All right.
Because the widespread impact of it... No, it's fine. Don't worry. It's a really good question. And the widespread impact of the 11 kilovolt feeder fault that occurred at 849 at Moorgate substation was out of all proportion to its individual significance in a well-designed power system. Mm-hmm. And it's alarming that so much chaos could have been caused by this single event. This fact alone would therefore justify a full review of the design and operational standards of London Underground's power supplies with the aim of improving the resilience of London's tube network. So it took down a lot. And it actually caused, because it also impacted radios and the ability for people to communicate with people stuck in the trains. Yeah. Obviously, it stopped a whole load of trains running. So you had people who were on trains, like packed commuter trains, stuck in the middle of tunnels, not able to move.
And in the dark.
And in the dark, without any... And this is also back in the days before widespread use of cell phones with torches on, because if that had happened now, assuming the cell phones were still working and it wasn't some sort of EMP, you would have just had torchlight. Nobody would have had a problem seeing, and there would have been video, and you wouldn't have had to worry about CCTV. And there would have just been a mass of individual footage going up on places like Twitter and TikTok of people's different accounts of what happened. Yeah. But at the time, the internet was still in its infancy. Mobile phones were still in their infancy. And the vast majority of phones in 2005 didn't have a camera on them, I don't think. Or if they did, then they were pretty shit cameras.
Yeah, they would be crap cameras, yeah, they would be.
Now, before we move on to the next part of the episode, which we're going to talk about Jean-Charles de Menezes, there are 20 questions, and this list is up on my website, codshit.com.
Have we got the question about why one of the bombs went off on a bus?
Well,
because it seems to be that the target was the underground. Why is the bus? Why was the bus?
Well, the thing is that there's other questions about the bus. So let's go because questions in my list we have question number 11 and question number, where are we? 13. Mm-hmm. And so the first question obviously is Visor Consultants. We now know who hired them, but why wasn't it being reported in the media?
Yeah, okay.
Because the media was dead silent about it, apart from that initial report that everybody's heard. Why did the bombers buy return tickets and leave enough of a trail that the police... and leave enough of a trail that police could find them within days?
Because of
but if you're... Well, yeah. Why? Obviously, we've asked this question, why didn't the CCTV works when they're actually checked twice a week by the bus company?
Yeah.
And as I said, when they were checked, that the time before the explosions, it was a different crew that came to check them. One thing that I've always wondered is question 4: why didn't they wear suicide vests?
Okay,
Given that you're,
I can tell you exactly why they didn't wear that.
okay,
Because they're too easy to identify if they wear a suicide vest, because the head always survives. What
okay,
happens
that's
is
interesting.
the explosion goes off, compresses your chest, pops your head off the shoulders, and you always find the head.
That's interesting. My theory was that there would be less hassle on the tube, but it's also the standard modus operandi of Islamic terrorists. It's one
Well,
of their
not
hallmarks.
necessarily in this country, though. And abroad,
true.
yes. Abroad, yes, but not here. Apart from Manchester. And that's exactly what happened. His head popped off and was found
Yeah.
further down the hall.
The other thing is, given that these are supposed to have been fundamentalist, devout Muslims, nobody anywhere near any of the sites of the explosion, none of the survivors heard any cries of Allahu Akbar, which God is great. Which, if they were actual suicide bombers, then according to their twisted ideology, if you're a suicide bomber and you blow yourself up in the name of Allah, you end up in heaven with 7 virgins or something like that.
42.
42, sorry.
Yeah.
Underestimated it.
The number of virgins you get is very important.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. But in another blatantly obvious connection with 9/11, ID documents from one of the bombers was found in both Aldgate and Edgware Road. So how can one bomber leave ID documents in 2 different places?
I'd just like to address the chat. It's not theory, Adam. It's fact.
The number 30 bus that exploded was diverted on the morning of the bombings, not after the bombings. It was beforehand. It was somehow in the right place just for the guy to get on it, and then it deviated and ended up in Tavistock Square.
Yeah.
And then exploded, and it wasn't supposed to be. That wasn't the bus's normal route.
Well, there's a great question. There's a great answer from from Robin in the chat. Okay, with regard to number 5, I think. So
Okay.
So the people that were playing the part of bombers thought they were in the exercise.
Well, yes, absolutely. That's exactly what I've always thought.
Yeah.
I think that those 4 guys were basically just normal, upstanding British Muslims.
Yeah.
And they were.
Do you want to make 40 quid, guys?
Well, one of them had just had a baby. And I mean, it's obviously kids are expensive. I think it may have been more than one, but I can't. It was a long time ago that I did that research. But they didn't. It's like, do you want to make an extra few quid? We need some Muslim-looking guys to help us out with an anti-terror exercise. Maybe it was even Visor Consultants that hired them. I mean, there's no evidence of that, but it would be great cover.
Yeah. Well, it's speculate. We're into speculation now, but carry on.
I'm having some.
What? Are we having a problem? Oh, Ed. Ed's gone. My goodness. So Ed has obviously got an issue, which isn't great. But we'll carry on and see how long we can hang in there. I'm interested in number 8. I'm interested for his question, his response to that. What's going on in the south of England that you guys have really, really bad, broadband? What is going on down there? Because Ben and I, as you know, talk quite a lot, and I moved away from Virgin to BT. I know. I mean, they've gone from 500 meg to what's it called? 70 meg. But the connection's fairly reliable. Most of the problems you get at my end are me. And I'll be quite honest. Normally it's a technical issue involving me or OBS, right? But Ben seems to have a nightmare with his internet connection. I mean, first of all, his broadband wasn't great, so he was using his 5G, and that was a nightmare. And now he's got this fibre thing, and it goes up and down like the proverbial prostitute's underwear. You know, I just don't know what's going on down there. And then Ed obviously has his issues as well. Are you back, Ed? Are you back? Talk to me, big boy. Ed? Come back to me. Anyway, so apart from that, people, yeah, Adams is fine, but you're not in the South Coast, Adam, as far as I'm aware. You know, I mean, do you guys not listen to me when I'm speaking? When I say South Coast, I mean South Coast. I don't mean somewhere in, like, cider country or wherever it is you live. You know, Badgerville, Trumpton. Tom Secker back in the day thought his research on 77 was spot on. I've never heard of Tom Secker. It's something to look up. Real Greek news. That's interesting. Do you do real Greek news? That's quite interesting. An hour from the coast. Yeah, okay. Well, I'm an hour from Carlisle. Does that mean I live in England? No, it doesn't. I don't live in England. I didn't say that. I said undergarments. I think you'll find I was quite proprietary. Yes, I'm hoping Ed will be coming back. That if I thought he wasn't coming back, I wouldn't be sitting here yakking away to you at the speed of sound. You know, for you're just covering for him in the vain hope that he might just come back. I shall check. Has anyone been having trouble with Twitter today? I'm finding that when you type messages into it, it takes ages. What's going on? Is that just me? Because every other website on the internet seems to be fine. Carlisle isn't far from my bootleg operations. You're correct, Andrew. That will be the destination. Should I have to start making booze runs? The problem is you've got to... he said something derogatory about our software that we just purchased, which is annoying because it costs us a bloody fortune. Right, so let me check. Come on, Ed. Come to Daddy. Come back to us. Right, where were we? Ed's been swatted. No, he's in communication with me on Twitter, so that's probably phone though. But he is. Maybe it was an errant seagull attack. Maybe they attacked his broadband. He is rebooting, and we are awaiting his resurgence in a new and improved version. So, oh, here we go. Hello, Ed. Yes? Do we have you back?
Yes, you have me back.
Yes, we have him back. By Jove, we've done it. We've managed to talk our way back. And he's with us. Can you share us? Yes, here he goes. Yep. He's sharing his screen. We're back to normal. Well done, people. Well done. We hung in there. Thank you.
I don't understand it. Ring Central decided to start doing a freaking update right in the middle of I mean, who even designs software like that?
Well, Microsoft. Microsoft do that as well.
Can we not talk about Microsoft, please?
This is why the first thing I do when I load a new OS on a PC is I install something like anti-spy bot or whatever. In fact, usually 2 different ones, and stop all the telemetry. And it makes it such a different experience. I never get interrupted. I never get any problems, and it never really crashes.
I'm going to do that. But I've actually been thinking of switching to Linux. Anyway, let's crack on with the podcast. I do apologize for the interruption. The government refused to accept a link between the bombings in Iraq, even when Chatham House was saying that there was a link. Another strange one is that the bus bomber blew himself at the top and rear of the bus rather than the bottom middle, where he would have killed far more people. And at the time, I've always had this suspicion
that again, if we were operating on the basis that these guys are actors, not bad actors, but actual actors, right? You know, they're just filling in, and you get on this bus and you do, you know, you travel, and he's going, "Oh, it's mob down there. I'm just going to go upstairs." I don't think he was supposed to be on the bus. I don't think so either.
I think he was supposed. Yeah, and I think at some point in the whole thing, something twigged for him, and he realized that there was something else going on. That he somehow became suspicious, and that he did a runner, and essentially they were following the powers that be, or whoever was running the exercise was following these guys around. I mean, they wouldn't have just released them without knowing what was going on. And so when he got on that bus in an attempt to try and get the hell out of there, they had it diverted. And I've long thought that his only option, when he realized what was happening, and he'd obviously heard about the bombs on the underground, that he decided to get to a part of the bus that would injure the least people when the bomb went off, and that was potentially his last act, was actually to try and save people rather than kill people, having been put in a situation that he didn't want to be in. And this is conjecture, and I'm not in any way trying to denigrate or undermine anything relating to the people who died on that bus, because a lot of people were hurt, and none of this podcast is attempting to do that. That's not where these episodes come from. We're just trying to explore and trying to understand and trying to make sense of something that, when you listen to the government and the media, what they're telling you just doesn't make sense. And also the same thing happened on the underground, that actually more people could have been killed, but they weren't. And that's something that's I've always wondered about that. Why was the number 30 bus the only one that was diverted? And is it true that the driver was asking for instructions when the bomb went off? Was anyone shot by the police, as reported by a New Zealand newspaper? And why were 8,000 people in the HSBC Tower ordered to not look outside their windows for 6 hours, which was a very strange... it was a very strange thing. There's a piece about this on my website, codshit.com. If you go on there, there's a whole section on the London bombings. But yeah, that was you can...
Do you know that
you
link,
can look
Adam?
it up.
Can you drop that in?
And yeah, I mean, you basically, that HSBC Tower one, that was reported in the media. Not much, but they were all told to not look outside the windows. That's the HSBC Tower in Canary Wharf. I'm not sure if HSBC is still there, but
were they told maybe it was because there was a danger of flying glass if something exploded outside or something like that?
I can't remember off the top of my head the reason that they were given.
Right. Okay.
But I don't think it had anything to do with the bombings. I'm not sure.
All right.
Again, I'd have to look it up.
Strange. Very strange indeed.
Another one. Yeah. I mean, again, with 7/7, as with other of these sort of what we think are staged, fake terrorist attacks, there are always witnesses who seem, in retrospect, like crisis actors.
Okay.
And there was a guy called Richard Jones who was a witness to the bus bomber.
Yeah.
And he was one of the people who said it was a suicide attack, but his story kept changing. And 1 minute he was one part of the bus, the next minute he was another part of the bus. Then the bomber he got up and changed seats and then went upstairs, and when he just went upstairs, he was giving all sorts of different stories.
Right. But let's put this into perspective. There should have been crisis actors hanging about, shouldn't there? Because if there was an exercise ongoing, and I'm assuming it's not just a tabletop exercise, right?
Well, it's absolutely not tabletop.
Right. So they would be ready to test everything. So your ambulance, police, fire, and all that would be expecting to receive people who were pretending to be casualties.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So there should have been a massive amount of crisis actors milling about, ready to burst into action as they play their part. The whole thing just sounds too coincidental to be true, doesn't it?
It yes, absolutely, and that's the point at which you start researching and you start digging, and that's that. I mean, because 7/7 was one of my earliest rabbit holes. After 9/11,
yeah,
properly woke me up. 7/7 came. It was because 9/11 happened in 2001. I didn't start my blog until about 2003 or 4.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd been going for a year or two when 7/7 happened. And after 9/11, all of the terrorism stuff, we'd had the Iraq War.
Yeah.
Well, the Iraq War was still ongoing, but we'd had the invasion. But all of the terrorism stuff kind of started petering off a bit. And then we had 7/7, and it all started up again. So we have the paper documents, surviving bomb blasts that rip apart stealing people.
Well, so paper's quite flexible, and pressure wave hits it, and it doesn't tear, it bends and gets blown around,
And I'm sure that's what happened on 9/11 as well.
Oh, with the passport, yeah.
Now, here's a funny one. That if you're going to use 4 bombs in 4 locations, blowing yourself up in the process, why would you leave extra bombs in your hire car for the police to find?
No.
That's what they found at Luton Station.
No. Hold on, who hired the car?
I don't know.
So these guys all travelled together in a hire car to Luton Station and then got the train into London?
I think they might have had separate cars.
All right, but one of them left bombs on a hire car. So did some people chicken out?
Well,
should it have been a bigger event?
Maybe. Who knows? I mean, maybe there was people that were supposed to go along that didn't. Mm-hmm. Maybe they didn't know they were bombs. Maybe they found out halfway through.
Yeah.
And the thing is that the police were talking about timers 1 minute and suicide bombers the next.
Mm-hmm.
Where was the stuff about timers coming from? Nobody ever explained that. Plus, there's not actually any actual proof that says 100% that they were suicide bombers, because you've got the lack of Allahu Akbar, you've got rucksacks instead of suicide vests.
Yep.
There's various things about that, and then the final one is the one that I've mentioned before, which is the passenger Bruce Late, who was evacuating the underground and said that he was stepping over holes in the floor where the metal had been blown upwards, and he was really worried about cutting himself or because they looked like really jagged bits. But again, it's one of those stories that
photographic evidence doesn't seem to corroborate it, does it?
Absolutely.
Before we finish it, could we nip back to question 8? What's all that about?
Oh yeah, we skipped that one.
Well, I think that's when you went down, mate. And I don't mean in a sexual manner, but
that's true. Yeah. Bibi Netanyahu, he's currently is he Israeli PM?
Yeah.
He's basically been at the top of Israeli politics for 20 or 30 years.
Forever. Yeah.
and he's been prime minister and finance minister and stuff. And at the time, in 2005, he was the Israeli finance minister, and he was in London, and somehow received a warning and evacuated where he was, and has never adequately explained it.
And where was he?
I think he was in a hotel in London, or he was in the Israeli embassy or something like that. But he basically evacuated before it all kicked off. And that's something that has
So you're not going to phone up Benjamin Netanyahu and go, "Hey Benji, we're going to have an exercise tomorrow, so you might want to leave London." And he'll go, "Whoa, why would I want to leave London?" Yeah. That sounds really plausible, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. But again, if people go to culture.com, look for the London bombing section. There's an article there that says the true inside facts.
Right, Adam, get your keyboard ready. What's that link that you're saying there?
Shit. Cod as in fish, shit as in poo.
Codshit.com.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
And on there, on the right-hand side, if you scroll down a bit, you'll see an index. And there's a London bombings option there. If you click on that, the first article that comes up is one called "The True Inside Facts About 7/7 London Bombings," and it's an interview which you won't find online anymore. But I captured a whole bunch of stuff from back in the day, and that's an interview with an intelligence agent of some description, and a guy called James Casbolt, who was a former MI6 agent, and someone they just called him X10, which I always thought was a bit Robert Ludlamy. But he's, I mean, the way he speaks and stuff, people should read that and make their own minds up, because he also mentions Jean-Charles de Menezes, which is the last part of the podcast. And it's not. I mean, I realised that we wanted to stop at 10, but there's
listen. There's no problem. There's no pressure on you, mate. No pressure. We had a blip, and you've done very well to recover from it. So let's just give this man the time that he requires.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. Now, for people who don't know, Jean-Charles de Menezes was a Brazilian electrician. And he was in London doing what a lot of Brazilians do, and just trying to find a better life, trying to find some money, although I don't know why the hell you'd leave Brazil, but...
Sorry, I was just trying to process what the Brazilians normally do in London. Do they open restaurants with, like, loads of meat?
Well, in his case, he was an electrician.
Right, okay. Sorry.
And I mean, I know Brazilians do bar work. I've never actually met that many Brazilians in Brighton.
No.
But he was also
they speak Portuguese, not Spanish.
Yes. And I'm sorry if there are any Portuguese people listening. I'm totally mangling because it's Jean-Charles Menezes, because they just have this weird pronunciation thing going on. The Portuguese, okay. I could never get my head around it. But it was. I've been there a few times. Lovely place. You should go.
Oh, yeah.
Now, it was July the 22nd, 2005. So this is about 2 weeks, roughly.
Yeah.
After the London bombings, and he was on his way to work, sitting quietly on a tube train at Stockwell, waiting for his journey to begin. And he was cornered by police officers, held down and shot 7 times in the head and once in the shoulder.
Why?
That's a good question.
Was he armed?
Police? No, he was not. I mean, he wasn't a suspicious person. He did all sorts of stories came out afterwards that he was wearing a big jacket, that he was that he evaded arrest, that he jumped the barriers, that he looked like a terrorist. They tried to. I'll show you a picture in a minute. Well, it's all a bit hazy. The police say he did. There's supposedly witnesses that say he didn't, and he just literally just walked onto the tube train and just cracked on. But it was literally, I mean, even even for a suspected terrorist being shot 7 times in the head and once in the shoulder. I mean, okay, because one of the things that the police said was that the officers were all jumpy because of 7/7, and they were on the lookout for another supposed terrorist who'd been yada yada.
As a former firearms officer with the police, right? Let me tell you exactly what happened here. The police were jumpy because they were the Met. And they're trigger-happy fucking bastards who want to shoot anyone they can. That's the case. And if I'm wrong, I'm sorry. But as far as I could see, being in the police and observing what goes on in London, because it's, it is one big boys club, that's what the Met were like.
Well,
and you know what? If you wanted a holiday, you shot somebody, because the Met would send you on a 2-week holiday abroad, just to chill out before you came back and faced the music.
You're speaking from experience, so your direct experience is not something that can or should be censored or ignored.
No, it shouldn't.
I mean, the Metropolitan Police they've got that reputation up to this day. I mean. Yeah, you just have to look at the Just Stop Oil thing and how they'll they'll batter anti-lockdown protesters and let the BLM people do whatever they want and rip statues down.
Yep.
So this high tension scenario at the tube station turned out to be a gross error resonating from the boiling pressure cooker of the London bombings investigation. That's the official explanation.
Yeah.
The police operation team mistook Menezes for a suspect connected to the previous day's attempted bombings in the city. And tragically, their mistake, not the previous days.
The previous weeks. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. But he was now. That's who they say they mistook him for.
Holy shit. Were the BBC involved here? Sorry. I shouldn't be making jokes like this.
I mean,
that's what the BBC would do. They would change someone's characteristics, shall we say. But yeah, that's now, no way. No freaking way. Even with a good tan, you're not going to look like the other guy.
Now, you can't deny that if you take him on his own, that Jean-Charles does, he could be mistaken for being slightly Arabic. I mean, that picture does make his skin a bit lighter, but I mean, he's a Brazilian in London. His skin is going to go a lot lighter than it would be in Brazil. But even so, I mean, it's just the shape of the face is different. The shape of the nose is different.
The ears,
the eyes are different. The ears. I mean, it's like looking at an apple and a banana and trying to tell me they're the same thing.
If she has an apple, she has a banana.
Exactly. Now, the story is completely fraught with discrepancies between the official account and the eyewitness testimonies intended by widespread condemnation and demands for the truth.
Yeah.
Initial reports claim that Menezes was suspicious wearing bulky clothing, running from officers and jumping over the subway gates. Now, in terms of the bulky clothing, let's just pop.
Oh, let's see. What was
That's a bit of a gruesome picture.
That's not bulky clothing.
That's not bulky. And bearing in mind,
can we move on?
I'll pop this one back.
Yep.
Bearing in mind that this is July and it's London and it's not 2023, so it was bloody hot.
And he's on the underground. You don't need bulky clothing in London in 2000.
And if you, there was no rain forecast. There was no reason he would be either cold or wearing anything bulky.
Yeah.
But they also claimed he was running from officers and he jumped over the subway gate. But subsequent investigations and leaked documents. But all of the stuff that the police said later on came out to be proved false. Leaked documents, things like that.
Yeah.
And he literally just got on the subway and they chased him, and they got rid of him.
Do you remember? Do you remember Stephen Waldorf? The one they made the salad out of?
I thought that came from the Waldorf Astoria in New York.
No. Do you remember the guy? Do you remember Stephen Waldorf who got shot in the Mini? They were looking for this guy, right? Who was meant to, the Met Police were looking for a guy, and apparently they discharged something like 40 rounds into a Mini at this guy, and it turned out to be the wrong guy. This might be another rabbit hole we get down at some point. Okay, so they put 40 rounds into a Mini of a guy and his girlfriend, and they survived.
But that's like the story of the woman who went skydiving and her parachute didn't open, but her fall was broken by high voltage electrical cables, and she walked away from the experience.
Yeah.
This goes to show you that when it's your time, it's your time.
Yeah, and then there's a woman whose parachute did open and she landed on a helicopter that was spinning up ready to take off.
Okay, let's move on. Now, going back to Jean-Charles, the Crown Prosecution Service decided in July 2006, nearly a year after his death, not to prosecute any individual officer, but instead charge the Metropolitan Police with health and safety charges.
Health and safety?
Health and safety. Now, these charges were incredibly obscure given the extreme consequence of the offence, cold-blooded murder. Despite the calamity of his death, the coroner at the inquest, Sir Michael Wright, restricted the jury's verdict by instructing them to dismiss an unlawful killing charge. In this consequence, the jury's indirect verdict declared Menezes was unlawfully killed as a result of gross negligence, but stymied after the exclusion of a direct unlawful killing charge. So,
right. So
it was another.
So let me paint a little scenario here. You and I are on this jury, Ed. And the judge says to you, you cannot have an unlawful killing charge. What do you say to the judge? Because I'd be saying, I'll fucking decide, not you. It's meant to be a jury of his peers, not you. You're just there to give the sentence. That's what I'd be saying.
Yeah, I mean, what I probably would have done is I'd have gone, because I've done jury service once, and it was really boring. But I did learn a few things about the system, and what I would have done was told him that the jury needed to go back and talk, and then I'd have basically said something to them along the lines of, "We need to go against this, and we have to get some justice here."
Yeah, I think so. Definitely. I mean, I've not done jury service, but I never will because I was a cop. So as a cop, you can't do it, and then as an ex-cop, you're never going to get selected.
Yeah, but there are echoes of the useless 9/11 Commission inquiry, and all of this stuff. One of the reasons why I wanted to do these podcasts now, even though there's so much in the future, but it gives people a feel of how all of the stuff that we've been through over the last 3 years, how all of that started. Not just the thing that I'm not going to talk about, but we all know. Yeah. But also the fact that there's no. It's like when we look at some of the people who have attempted to bring charges and have what's his face? What's that guy? Anyway, we probably shouldn't say his name because of the channel. But I mean that cop, that ex-cop who spent hours and hours and hours doing a whole deposition with loads of evidence about the thing and how it was all a massive crime. And with it, it's like, but this is where it all started. This is in 2000. I mean, it's the early 2000s that they started having judges, like we've just said, that the judge basically said to the jury, you can't pass the verdict that you're obviously going to pass.
I'm sorry, Mr. Judge. I'll decide.
Yeah, and it was just insidious. Right. And insidious is a good word. I don't get to use that very often, but it's through new perils on the light of misidentification in an era of global surveillance and intelligence gathering. That was a big thing. And also just there was so much of the civil liberties that we're now lacking were actually lost back in 2005.
Oh yeah,
because one of the consequences of the London bombings was a massive erosion in civil liberties.
Yeah, well, I mean,
and I've
obviously we had 9/11, right?
Mhm.
And the UK looked at that obviously with some envy, right? Because they're thinking, how can we implement such great control laws on our population that the US have been able to do with the population's blessing, right? You know, so
yeah,
it's
but
like,
if we take it back to the IRA,
yeah,
I suspect that we have been doing nefarious, or not we, because I don't want to associate us with it,
yeah,
but
I know what you
the
mean. I know what you mean.
evil entity known as the UK government and the establishment have been doing such things for a lot longer than the US has been around.
Well, of course they
I mean,
have.
in fact,
oh
I
my
suspect
God,
that we were probably
invented it.
well, they were probably trying to do things to stop the US getting founded in the first place that resembled all of this shit anyway.
Yeah.
Now we come to an interesting little part of the episode, and this is pretty much the last part, which is a little theory that I've held for nearly 20 years now. Well, let's say 17, 18 years. I think that Jean-Charles de Menezes was somehow part of the London bombings, and that he was. And so this is my little theory, and I have no proof.
Yep.
I've got no proof whatsoever. All of this is just based on hunches and all of the stuff that I was reading. But I suspect that it was an inside job, like 9/11 was.
Yeah.
And that the crews, that essentially that the backpacks that the guys were carrying around didn't actually have any explosives in them, and that the explosives were somehow on the train. And that
whoa, hold on.
But wait, no, let me finish.
Okay.
And then you can tear the whole theory to pieces in one go at the end. It's just easier, because otherwise we'll just start arguing.
No, go on.
But maybe what happened was that the crews who had to do the electrical work, whether it was on the bus, I mean, let's say for instance, it was the bus crew, because we know that bus was worked on.
Yeah,
and say, for example, one of the normal guys that was on the Black Ops team that did that sort of thing,
right?
That they were electricians and they needed to do some electrical stuff. And one of the guys in the crew, they needed a certain number of people, and one of them, for whatever reason, couldn't make it, and they couldn't find a replacement. And so so they found Jean-Charles. I think there's been some stories about him potentially having some issues with his immigration status. I'm not sure if that's actually true or not.
Okay.
They were just rumors that I heard at the time. And so they employed this electrician, and that he was somehow a loose end that needed to be tied up. Either he expected something and he was, and they'd picked up chatter from his phone or from surveillance or whatever that suggested he was going to talk about something. Maybe he'd done some work for some cash in hand stuff, and then afterwards said, hang on a minute, that was the bus I was working on the other day. And maybe he has a conversation with someone, or maybe they bugged his house and he's watching TV and suddenly he starts shouting at the television and he's completely on his own, but they're obviously listening to him and they hear him, and that somehow it set off some alarm bells somewhere, and they decided that he needed to be removed from the chessboard. Hence the utterly brutal and I mean, it wasn't just 7 shots. I mean, we're not talking about America here.
Oh, I know.
I mean, it seems even for a police officer, because I mean, you're a firearms officer. What is the protocol for dealing as a firearms officer? How were you trained to deal with? Okay, say you encounter me and I look really suspicious, and I've got a suicide vest on,
Yeah,
and
okay.
I look like I'm about to blow myself up, and you have your sidearm.
That's a scenario that I
what
haven't really been trained for, to be honest. Nobody ever mentioned suicide vests, but just off the top of my head, I would say shot to the head. One shot to the head would be it. Because once
that
you're shot in the head, you're going to fall over, right? And
that was all of the research I did said the same thing.
yeah,
That
that's
you wouldn't shoot. I mean, the specific thing about a potential suicide bomber is that you absolutely do not shoot them in the chest,
no,
simply because in shooting them you might make them
yeah,
blow up.
You might trigger the bomb. Yeah, so one shot to the head. That's what I would.
Yeah, so they and this is where the police story falls apart, because one of their things was that they thought he had a bulky jacket on and they thought he had a suicide vest on, and they shot him in the chest.
Yeah, that doesn't fly. And the thing is, as a police officer, you're very conscious when you shoot someone that you must not overpenetrate and you must not cause collateral damage, because if you shoot someone and miss, that bullet could go on for a mile.
Mm-hmm.
So who's it going to kill? I mean, if you shoot someone and miss and it kills a 5-year-old, 200 yards down the street, that's your fault.
And I mean, bearing in mind that when Jean-Charles was shot, he was in an underground carriage.
Yeah.
So you've got the potential for ricochets. But people have to understand that he wasn't shot. I'm just going to put this gruesome picture up. It was close range. They practically had the gun right in his face, and they shot him 7 times.
It sounds like an execution, right?
It
doesn't sound like a police action. It sounds like a spook action.
Exactly.
Now,
and so,
but the other thing is, right? If the bombs were pre-wired and set there, how does that explain the bus? Because I don't think the bus was meant to be the bus. I don't think the bus was meant to be a target. I think it was meant to be a train.
I think it was too. I think that at some point in the whole proceedings, I can't remember off the top
You know
of my
what?
head
I
the
don't think they would wire a train or a bus or anything with an actual bomb in it in case it didn't go. Because then if it didn't go and somebody found it, or it went at the wrong time, right? So say you remotely trigger the train to blow and it doesn't go, right? And then it goes at the wrong time and wipes out a complete crowded station, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then and the casualties suddenly go from, tens to hundreds. Yeah,
Absolutely.
Your collateral damage has then gone sky high, because let's face it, enough people died there, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can't see them, and I might be wrong, right? But I can't see them putting them in place. I can see them making people do it unwittingly, yeah, because then you've got eyes on that device all the time, because you're going to trail them, as you said. Somebody's going to be following them, right? So yeah, you know where they are and you know what's happening, and it could be that somebody said, well, he's on the bus, he's obviously trying to get away, divert the bus, he's not coming off the bus, just blow the thing, right? And that's the kind of scenario I can see. Because you know what people are like in these. I mean, you only need to look at that WikiLeaks thing when the guys were in a helicopter shooting the Reuters journalists.
Absolutely.
They're like, light them up. I mean, that's just you're dehumanizing. You're just putting yourself in a position where it's just light them up. And then they're saying things like, look at those dead bastards,
Absolutely.
And they have no idea what they've just done. They've just wiped out journalists, and then they wipe out a guy with his kids that are coming to try and save the people that they've just wiped out.
Yeah, it's almost like it's a video game.
Yeah, it is a video game, and that's the problem. This is the problem with America, right? And this is why I don't want us to become America, and yet we are lockstep into it, and we're marching further and further down that route. Because it's John, everything's a game.
Yeah, but John, if you look at actual history, there's a fantastic book called Web of Deceit about British
You're right.
history.
No, you're
That's,
right. You're right.
I mean, we were.
We are the bad guys.
The Americans being like us, and I mean, it's possible that we're being a bit like Rome, as in ancient Rome.
Yeah.
But this is how empires
societies
fall.
end. Yeah, this is how.
Well, this is how.
Yeah, it is.
Civilizations.
Yeah,
and I mean, it's the thing about the 7/7 bombings that there was a whole bunch of impacts. They were a massive boon to the UK's counter-terrorism industry. Tony Blair, I hate him so much, used the attacks to broaden the scope of anti-terror activity to encompass not just violent extremists, but anyone promoting ideas that, as the BBC, who back then kind of reported the truth a bit sometimes, could be linked to violence. So instead of violent extremists, you can be linked to violence in the UK, and that's essentially you become a terrorist.
Yeah.
And Blair's efforts to suppress people associated with extremist ideas faced trouble since officials could not agree on the definition of the word terrorism. The UK's Terrorism Act, passed in 2000, amended in 2001, was amended in 2005, and then again in 2006. The bombings were cited in 2006 by the UK ambassador to Saudi Arabia, who warned that British lives on British streets were at risk if the Serious Fraud Office's investigation into the Al Yamama arms deal continued. The memo asked, if this caused another 7/7, how could we say our investigation is more important? Yeah. And I mean, the 7/7 bombings, they sent shockwaves through London. And I mean, I've been around since 1973.
Yeah.
And I've seen, I mean, although I've never been involved in any kind of IRA bombs, I live not that far away from where an IRA bomb happened. But none of the Republican bombings, some of which, it has to be said, were probably instigated by our very own security services because they're evil death cult bastards. But none of them. Yeah. I mean, we had loads of IRA bombings that made the news, but nothing had the same effect as 7/7.
Yeah.
And
yeah, no, I mean, that's true.
And whether that's the media, whether that's the media, whether that's, I don't know. I've never been able to put my finger on it. But that's basically it as far as the podcast goes. I would like to just point out at the end, I put this last slide up because, as with quite a lot of the things that we talk about on here, real people lost their lives that day. And I happened to find this collage of, I don't know if this is all of them, and I don't know what the white one is at the bottom corner, but I think that one might represent people who we don't know about.
Someone we don't know. Well, the one that gets me is, see the first column, third down in the middle, right? That's not Jill Dando. It's not Jill Dando, is it?
No, it looks a bit like it.
It does look like Jill Dando, though, doesn't it? Bloody hell.
And it's easy in these rabbit holes to get kind of wrapped up in all of the facts and all of the just the inhumanity of it all. And despite what happened, I mean, none of anything that I've...
Actually, here's a question, and I'm sorry to interrupt you there.
No, it's okay.
But did anyone ever claim responsibility for it?
No.
So, nope. So if you're a mastermind sitting in a cave planning the next big thing, do you not want to take the credit?
But that one didn't take credit. He actually said it wasn't him.
Well, let's face it. I actually don't. Let's face it. Ever since the CIA invented them in the first place, right? Put them in position, funded them, trained them, and then used them. Okay, I don't think. I think that guy got a bum deal. I really do.
Yeah. But I think so many of them do. One has to wonder how many of the the minions, not the people who are at the top end of the pyramid, but the people who are at the top part of because if you think about that pyramid with the Illuminati eye that's on the dollar bill, the top part of the pyramid is separate from the bottom part of the pyramid. And the people I'm talking about are the people at the very, very top part of our bit at the pyramid. I mean, us poor bastards, we're all at the bottom.
Oh, yeah, of course.
But the ones at the top, actually, in a way, I feel more sorry for them because they don't know that there's a glass ceiling. And the ones in the upper part of the pyramid string those upper level minions along, making them think that they're going to have a part of the pie.
Yeah.
And when the said minion realizes that they're not going to have a part of the pie, and then starts making noises about exposing the pie, the people at the very top just deal with them, and that's what you get.
Yeah, absolutely.
Car crashes, but yeah, I mean, we do need to remember that there's people.
Yeah, this is a human tragedy. That's what it is.
Exactly, and whether there's conspiracy theories, none of the, and then, to be honest, this goes for all of our shows. Nothing of any. I'm never coming from a place of trying to demean or downplay the loss of human life. It's more about, if anything, I'm incensed about the lack of truth, and I feel like I'm doing them a service by trying to get people asking questions, because I don't think we've been told the truth. And if they died as a result of an act of terrorism, compared to an act of deliberate governmental malfeasance.
Yeah, so if you died from an act of terrorism, or you died from an act of government, which one is worse? And I think you know the answer.
Yeah, I would say government, because that's definitely like being stabbed in the back. It's like it's basically being stabbed in the back.
It's like going for a pint with your mate and he, dumps you in the shit.
What, you mean like 2020?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, just to just finish on a bit of a lighter note, earlier on today, you sent me a rather funny picture of a certain opposition leader who will become our next dear leader and my number one plaything. Because
Keith!
Keith! You need to find a noise with that, Keith. You know how you have the and it's okay because you've got until he's selected to become our next prime minister. But you need a Keith noise or something.
Keith.
But yeah, so
go on.
There we go. We now have Keith presenting a Vlandel to an unseen evil master.
Yeah.
He's
such a you've adjusted his t-shirt.
Yeah, no, I decided that I'm sorry, but he is the one that said, he was asked by a BBC reporter, and this isn't making shit up.
Yep.
He was asked when he spoke like a good little puppet at the Davos shindig, and he was asked whether he preferred Westminster or Davos. He said Davos. Yeah. So I decided that he's not allowed to have an England shirt, so I replaced it with a more appropriate one.
I'm quite worried. That these clowns win, because we'll never hear the end of it. It's like just sometimes better the devil you know, and I want Boris. No,
back.
I didn't mean him. I meant these women footballers. If they win on Sunday, we will never hear the end of it. It's going to be another 1966 all over again. It's going to go on and on and on for years, and it's like,
but can you imagine? Well, no, but it's going to be worse than that, because it's like 1966 plus the 2020s, because people are so much more sheep-like now.
Oh yeah, I know.
It's. I mean, just if you thought the Ukraine flags were bad, what if? Just no.
Yeah, I know.
I'm just. I don't know. Coming on to this show and being on Twitter and interacting with the people that I do. I had spent a really enjoyable couple of days with Johnny Vedmore over the weekend. And he's a really great guy, by the way.
Yeah. Well, maybe we should have him on the show. Is he interested in coming on?
I could certainly put a good word in for you.
Well, speak to him and see what he thinks.
Yeah, no, I will. I mean, he's fascinating to talk to about.
He does his own show, doesn't he?
Yeah, no, he's got a podcast called Newspaste.
Yeah, well, ask him if he wants to.
Newspaste.com.
Ask him if he wants to come along. I mean, we'll talk to anyone, you know.
Yeah, well,
I mean, you know us. We'll talk to you, for God's sake.
Yeah. I mean, crikey.
Yeah, I know.
I'm surprised anyone asked me to get on a podcast. You guys messaged me, and I was like, podcast. That sounds like fun.
You're a bit of a star. I was a star, Ed. People love you. People love you. They do.
Yeah, well, it's like the first woman that you fall in love with, the first podcast you do. You guys will always have a special place in my heart.
Thank you.
Even Ben, when he's being really grumpy and annoying. Bless him. I love him to bits, and he goes through shit too. So I mean, he does well coping with what he's got going on. Yeah, so I do, Ben. Well, I know you're listening.
I do more coping with what Ben's going on.
Well, he's going to put up with you too, you miserable old Scottish bastard.
I've got to put up with him. Bloody hell! It's like you have no idea.
You two are like an old married couple sometimes.
Yeah, well, I think that's the kind of dynamic that works well on TV, or you know, and this isn't TV, but it's the same kind of broadcast medium. You know, it kind of does work well, doesn't it?
Indeed.
Yes.
And with that, we now have to ask an answer.
What are we doing next?
Well, we don't have an answer because we'll put a poll up, but we have to have a think about what we're going to do for our next
I will
episode.
put a poll up and think about what we want to do next. So there's quite a few things that we've got on the list, but I don't know what we want to do.
Well, why don't we ask the audience if anyone out there has got any good suggestions?
Suggestions, yeah.
And while that's happening, I will have a quick look at our document.
Yeah, I haven't updated it yet. I'm sorry, mate. I should have.
I would really like to do John Lennon.
John Lennon? Really? What else is on the document? You know what I'd like to do? I'd like to do the Mars chair.
The Mars? That's not even on the document. What's the Mars chair?
The Mars chair. At Thingy Island. What's it called? Oh, God.
That Mars as in planet?
Yeah.
Well, chair as in...
You ever seen the movie Doom? Hold on. Let me just check.
You do realise that there's a whole thing about chairs, actual chairs.
Yeah. No,
weird.
I know. You don't. I know. Yeah, that search isn't going to work.
Well, I'll tell you what. While you're doing that, I can read some. We have the Schumann resonance. We have Freemasonry and the Knights Templar. Ancient forgotten civilizations, giants and mud fossils, cryptids, the orphan trains, world fairs.
Yep, world fairs and all that. They're all interesting, yeah.
Tartaria, which I'd be interested in doing because I'm unsold on Tartaria, and I know that a friend of mine is most likely listening in who is equally unsold on Tartaria, and he speaks Latin and he translates medieval Latin letters for fun.
Yeah, bloody hell.
So
for fun.
Well, he's retired, so it's kind of the thing that he does, and it's a great. I mean, if you're going to retire, you've got to keep your brain active, and I still think it's cool that he speaks Latin, and it's great. Anyway, but we're unconvinced about Tartaria. We've also got Sasquatch, Yeti, and the Big Grey Man.
Oh yeah.
The Montauk chair, which is an interesting one.
Montauk. The Montauk chair is the Mars chair. It's Montauk.
Oh. Well, why didn't you say Montauk?
Sorry, because I couldn't remember the name of the island.
For Montauk.
Yeah, but that is the Mars chair. The Yeah.
Right,
yeah.
okay, well, let's put Montauk Chair on there. I'm up for that.
There's two facets of that. One, they went to Mars on it, and secondly, they went through time on it. So,
well, let's put that on the list. I'm well up for that.
Okay, we'll have a poll. We'll do the poll offline. So you remember, you need to be subscribed. You go to the community tab, and you can vote in the poll. And I'll put the poll up probably tomorrow morning, and then you've got until sometime on Saturday to answer it. Yeah, and then I'll let I'll let Ed go mad. So, is there anybody in the chat got a favourite that we want to go with? Ed, have you got a favourite that you're thinking of? I know you like John Lennon. Is there a second that you would think of?
Well, I think if no one in the chat comes up with anything, because you've had your pick, I'll pick John Lennon.
Yeah.
If someone in the chat has a suggestion they would like us to cover.
Well, we've got the City of London as an entirety. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you're not going to put a poll up until tomorrow morning.
Yeah, I know.
So that's Friday morning.
Yeah.
So if anyone listening to this that's not live, because I know quite a few people listen to it.
Yeah.
Not live. And so they've got time to hit you or me up on Twitter with a suggestion. That's probably the easiest way to do it.
Yeah, hit us on Twitter. Yeah.
And if not, then why don't we just stick with your and my suggestion? Because it seems like we do this every couple of weeks. So if we go with, I'll suggest one, you suggest one, and we'll get the audience to suggest one, and then we'll just work through the list and just keep going because it's loads of fun.
There you go. Sounds good. Yep. Well, do you want to give us anything else, Ed, or is that us?
I'm pretty much talked out. I mean, well, no, I'm never talked out. I could talk the hind legs off a donkey. But I mean, we've been going for
do it so
over an hour and a half. So
you do it so well.
Thank you very much.
You sound so good. You know, I mean, Ben says I sound good, but you just blow me into the weeds.
I think we're a good combo, and don't be jealous, Ben. I'm not trying to steal him away from you or anything. Fuck's sake.
Right, dear. Thank you very much, people, for tagging along and staying with us, because I've noticed the concurrent viewers have stayed pretty high all night. We've done really well. So fantastic. I'd like to thank Ed. I think it's been illuminating. I've learned a lot on this one, because this isn't something that I'd really ever dived into. So thank you for that, Ed, and thank you, people in the chat and those that watch offline. And remember, hit us up on Twitter. You know, this is going to go on for a few years yet, I hope, right? So, you know, if you've ever anything you want to cover, just hit us up. We're more than happy to talk to you. You know, and let's do it.
Absolutely, it has a lot of legs, and I thoroughly enjoy it. And I always learn something new. Even on the subjects that I thought I knew a fair bit about, there's always something that you didn't know. Yeah, which is a good lesson for life as well.
You never knew that people's heads just survived when you had a suicide venture.
No, that was new. I learned something new in the last couple of hours.
There you go. So, thank you, everyone. And you know what? It's been great for you.
'Cause I don't give a fuck what you say. Yeah, I'ma do shit my way. So you can go kick rocks, I'ma stack bricks up, build what I want to make. Yo, I got a lot of shit to say, so I'ma do this every day. I'll be writing things until I'm fucking buried in my grave. 6 feet deep under, but my body won't decay. 'Cause my messages are timeless, so they'll put them on display. Oh yeah, I rap with a certainty, I have a sense of urgency. A message for eternity, for everyone internally. I had some people burning me, but now they fucking learn to see I ain't the one to fuck with. Now they looking nervously, and I don't really care what you think of me respectfully. You can kick rocks if you think you're fucking better, see. I will outwork you, turn you to an enemy. Hurt you so bad that you're gonna need some therapy. I got the motherfucking recipe. I've been cooking up hits, I'ma leave a legacy. You'll be looking small when you're standing right next to me. I'm 5'10", bitch, but I'm 10 feet. 'Cause I don't give a fuck what you say. Yeah, I'ma can go kick rocks, I'ma stack bricks up, build what I want to make. Cause I don't give a fuck what you say, yeah, I'ma do shit my way. So you can go kick rocks, I'ma stack bricks up, build what I want to make. Yeah, I'ma do it my way.
I can't contain it, I'm coming out with a statement. You really changed, man, all your music and arrangement. You don't know shit, shut your mouth, you can save it. I'm the same dude that got his come up from the basement. 100 songs, 100 weeks, didn't change it. Experiments, development, intelligence, and patience. I'll do it all again, cause I never feel complacent. Let's keep the good vibes, positivity's contagious. I'm never looking back, cause I made a life that's passionate. A college graduate suppressing all his talents, yeah. He found a way to go and change, become an advocate. For taking control of your life, go out and battle. And you think you have a dream, then act on it. Get after it, get out your head and fucking capture it. You got one life to master it. Don't give up on your future, we all start losers. We're all late bloomers, gotta struggle through the sewer.
What you say, yeah, I'ma do shit my way. So you can go kick rocks, I'ma stack bricks up, build what I want to make. Cause I don't give a fuck what you say, yeah, I'ma do shit my way. So you can go kick rocks, I'ma stack bricks up, build what I want to make. Yeah, I'ma do it